message, I do want to take a few moments to thank you all for allowing me to be away this last week at camp at Hanging Rock. I was the coordinator for high school paintball camp, and I know that sounds violent for a church camp, but it really wasn't as bad as you think. It was a lot of fun, and the kids had a blast, and it was a great week, even though we dealt with a lot of rain and such. But one of the things that I had asked, we had 30 students in attendance, and that was the cap. That was as many as we could have. So we were blessed in that regard, but 8 of those students had not given their lives to Christ. And 6 of them all came from one church. And it just so happens that there was one of those boys from the church that had 6 that gave his life to Christ this week, and was planning to go home and talk more with his family and more with his pastor about that, and be baptized there at his own church. And that's just exciting. That's the whole point of camp, is to share the gospel message and plant those seeds. And the cool thing was that that boy and his 5 friends from the same church, they all piled into a van together with their pastor. The pastor came and picked them up, and they all piled in a van together, and they rode home together. You could just hear them talking as they shut the doors on the van and they took off. You could see that they were still wound up and excited about their experience from the week. So I thank you for praying for us. Hopefully that fire that was lit in that one student will carry over to the others, because none of those students has accepted Jesus, and hopefully that will be something they'll take home with them, and that fire will continue to grow, and those students will get closer together as they grow together as a group. It was a great week. I thank you for your prayers for me as well, even though it was a long week with no plumbing. That was rough. No porta pots, and couldn't even wash our hands. There was no running water where we were at, so we got to main camp every evening, and it was a weird week for me. You know, all those creature comforts of air conditioning and a nice bed and all those kinds of things were kind of back burner issues. Didn't get those things out there where we were, and we had a lot of rain, as you well know, because it rained here as well. So that made it a little difficult to do some of the things that we had planned to do. But all in all, it was a great week, and I'm blessed to have been a part of it. You know, it's great to be a part of helping people, even when it means you have to sacrifice something to do it. Now, my sacrifices were minor this week compared to some sacrifices that I know of people in this modern day that are making sacrifices for the gospel, as well as people from Bible times that sacrificed a lot, sacrificed even maybe their lives for the sake of the gospel, sacrificed their very being so that the gospel could continue on. So my sacrifices are minor in that area. But today we're going to look at the sacrifices of Esther. We're going to get back into our study on the book of Esther. We're going to look at chapters 3 and 4 today in a sermon titled, If I Perish, I Perish. And we're going to see how Esther sacrificed herself, in a sense, for the purpose of saving the people of Israel. So go ahead and turn your Bibles to chapter 3. We're going to cover a lot of text today. We've got 2 chapters to cover, so I'm going to periodically stop and explain a few things just to avoid boredom and people falling asleep, including myself, because I got about 4 hours of sleep last night because of all the rain. So it'll hopefully help us kind of stay plugged in to the message as we work our way through it. But we are going to cover both chapters. Remember when we left 2 weeks ago, Mordecai had just exposed the plot to take out the king. These 2 guards had this conversation near the gate where Mordecai was, and they had planned to assassinate the king, and Mordecai overhears it. And he takes this information to Esther, who in turn saves the king, and it's investigated, and everything is good. Esther had been put into place to replace Queen Vashti, who had been dethroned by the king. And Esther makes sure in all of this investigation that Mordecai gets mentioned and written down into the court documents, which we will see come to light later in our study next week. But he's identified on paper as the one who foils the plot, but as we see, as we go into chapter 3, there's someone else that gets the credit, that gets the recognition, and gets the honors that really should have gone to Mordecai. There's this new threat that is burgeoning to the people of Israel. So let's look at chapter 3, verse 1. That's where we're going to start. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Now put yourself in Mordecai's shoes for just a moment. How many of you have ever experienced a moment where someone else got the credit for something that you did? Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? And it's frustrating, isn't it? It's aggravating. It makes us angry sometimes. And that's where Mordecai was. Mordecai was so frustrated. Here he had gone above and beyond to protect the king, even though this king is not from his people, but he went ahead and protected him anyway. And now this Haman is getting all the credit. He's getting all the honors. He's getting all the recognition. And then they're asking him or forcing him to bow down to this Haman, who's getting all the credit he doesn't deserve. And Mordecai's like, nope, not going to do it. And he gets just so full of himself that his pride keeps him from bowing to Haman. We're going to see how that affects the story as we roll on here in verse 3. The royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pure, that was the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Well, this would be where the festival of Purim that we talked about in the first week, that we'll talk more about on the 4th week of this sermon series, it comes from this moment where Haman casts lots to decide when is going to be the day and the time when the people of Israel are going to be exterminated. He lets it go to chance. And it turns out that it's going to be in this 12th month, which we now call December, this month of Adar. It's going to be the month of when the people of Israel will be exterminated. So we move on to verse 8. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all of the provinces of your kingdom, who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all the other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger, and he gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people what you wish, or as you please." Depending on your translation. Haman was so angry he was so indignant at what had happened that Mordecai would not bow down and honor him, that he not only decides to take Mordecai out for this incident, but he says, "I'm going to take out all of the people of Israel." And he brings this presentation before the king and lets the king know all these atrocities that the Jewish people are perpetuating against the people of Persia. And my mouth is really tired along with the rest of my body today, so bear with me. So anyway, he brings this presentation before the king, and as we read through the story of Esther, you will see that the King Xerxes, is kind of one of those kings that's not really always plugged into what's going on. He just kind of, whatever. He kind of listens to his advisors, probably too much. And in this case, he's like, "Yeah, don't even. I don't need your money. Don't bring your money. Just here's my ring. You can sign the decree with my ring. I don't even need to tell you what's right. Just write whatever you want up." And he hands this ring over to Haman. And so Haman writes up this decree. So we look up and continue on in verse 12. "Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. right now, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued to the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. They were bewildered. The people were confused. What in the world's going on? Think about this. It would be the same as someone that's an advisor to the President of the United States going into the President and saying, you know what? These Christians are out of control. We got to take these Christians out. They're going around spreading all kinds of rumors and lies and all kinds of things. So you need to act right now, President. We need to take out the Christians. And then all of a sudden, this announcement, decree goes out over CNN and MSNBC and all these other things saying, hey, Christians, we're going to take you out. In December, we're going to take you out. December 13th, 2015, be ready, because we're just going to wipe you all out. And it's not December yet. It's a long time before December. Imagine that. Imagine what that would be like to go through that, to hear that announcement, that your people, young and old, even the children, are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. You're going to be annihilated. That is what the people are facing. And even the people who are not Jewish are even confused, it says. They're like, what is the king doing? What is going on with these people? The Jews, they're peaceful people. They're not causing us any problems. Yeah, they're a little different, but they're not a troublemaking people. So this was a confusing time for all the people in Susa. We move into chapter 4, and Mordecai's story gets more attention at this point. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes, he put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So in this time, when this news comes out, the people go into this time of mourning. And you can imagine why. We would do the same thing. This tearing of the robes is a Hebrew tradition. Whenever you're in a time of mourning or great distress or even great righteous anger, it was traditional to tear one's garments as a sign of that. And it was also a sign of grief and mourning to pour ashes on one's head and dress in sackcloth. Everyone would know those people are in mourning because that's what they're doing. I'm glad that tradition has changed and we don't have to do that to go to a funeral today. That would be awkward. But this was their tradition. This is what they did. And it was a sign to all people around them that they were definitely in a grieving time. They were mourning the situation. So, in verse 6, we pick back up. Esther had sent this message to Mordecai after hearing what was going on. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go to the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. So Mordecai, through this servant, tells Esther what's happening. He even sends her a copy of the decree. Here's what's happening. Your people are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. Will you please, he pleads with her, will you please go and talk to the king. Plead for our lives. You have some influence here. Let the king know what's happening and how bad it is. And Esther is very troubled by this request. So when she hears the news from this servant, she sends the servant back to Mordecai with the following. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. Esther, you see, is reluctant to go to the king. She remembers what happens to people who disobey the king, right? She knows what happened. Vashti was asked to come to come to the king's throne room in that party at the beginning of the story, and Queen Vashti says, no, I'm not coming, and Queen Vashti is no more, right? She gets kicked out. She's no longer queen. That's how Esther becomes queen in the first place. Esther knows that if she goes into that throne room without being summoned, the king probably is going to have her killed. This is going to be the end of her days, if not the end of her life. So she is very reluctant to go before the king. So she sends this back to Mordecai, this report. And when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? And Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. First of all, Mordecai reassures Queen Esther. You've been prepared for such a time as this, he says, the theme of our entire sermon series. You've been placed in a place at just the right time, at just the right moment, with just the right power for you to have an influence over this king and save your people. I think that happens all the time for us. We go and we're in a place, we're in a moment for such a time as God had planned to use us for his work. I think we all have that opportunity to have that experience. And in this case, Esther has this chance to save her entire people group if she just takes it. And Mordecai is pleading with her, this is your time. This is the time that God has called you for. This is why you have been blessed with your position as queen. So Esther says, please, before I make my decision, you guys just go out and fast and pray. This is that spiritual moment that I talked about. This is that moment where we see kind of God showing up, even though he's not mentioned. This time where Esther instructs Mordecai to have all the people of Israel fast. Listen for God's will. Listen for God's leading. And that she and her people inside the throne room are going to be praying and fasting and asking God for direction. And then she agrees to do it with a sacrificial heart. She says, if I perish, I perish. What a statement. I will go before the king, and if I die for it, then so be it. She is determined that she must go before the king to save her people, no matter what the cost. There's some foreshadowing to Jesus in that decision. To go and sacrifice themselves, no matter what the cost, to save the people. Now, I believe that there are some application ideas here, 3 lessons that we can learn in chapters 3 and 4 that we can apply to ourselves today. The story continues on next week. We're going to get to the really good part of this story, the exciting part of this story next week. But I think there are 3 things that we can take from this chunk of the text that can really be beneficial to us today. The first lesson we learn is that pride comes before the fall. You've heard that statement before, I'm sure. We learned this lesson by watching Mordecai. While Mordecai is a faithful Hebrew, he is also a victim to his own pride. The people you see would have never been in trouble in the first place if Mordecai would have swallowed his pride and bowed down to Haman and just said, I know he isn't deserving of this praise and this honor, but for the benefit of everybody involved, I'm just going to bow down to him and get it over with. And it would have been done, and the people would have never been in danger because his pride took over. Because his attitude and his arrogance took him to a place where I'm not bowing down for anybody, and he got angry about it. It took him into a place where it caused trouble for all the people, not just him. We must remember that pride is something that can take us down, just as it almost took Mordecai down. We see other warnings in Scripture about our pride. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty